Skydiving, is it moral? Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm Father Mark Mary with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and this is Ascension Presents. We're gonna talk about skydiving. And what I hope this is, more than anything, is a little workshop in Catholic moral theology, and just how we do it, and we're gonna apply it to skydiving. I think you'll find the discussion quite reasonable and not at all agenda or conclusion driven, but just a good application of Catholic moral principles and theology. All right, and so just again, as a little reminder, in Catholic moral theology, for an act to be judged morally good, it has to be good on three levels. The object of the act has to be good, what you're doing has to be good, the intention has to be good, and then circumstances all have to be good. If one of those are off, the act is going to be judged as morally evil or not a morally good act, right? Okay, with skydiving, what's the object of the act, right? The object of the act, what you're actually doing is you're jumping out of a plane. So that's the object of the act. Now, if we look at this, and again, have patience with me, especially if you're very pro skydiving. I'm not coming at you. The act itself also, we just have to recognize that objectively speaking, it is a life-threatening activity. It's an extreme sport, and people do die from it. The numbers from, I believe last year it's through skydiving, and about 3.9 million jumps, there was 20 fatalities. The years before that were a few less. So certainly, and any website talking about it is going to acknowledge there is a risk factor. To kind of define our terms a little bit more, what most people who would be listening to this would be doing would be called what's called a tandem jump, which is like the jump you do the first time when you jump with like a pro. In that circumstance, the fatality rate is about 1 in 500,000. And so what we're gonna have to come back to and judge is okay, now how does that stand within Catholic moral theology? Is that an acceptable risk? Is it not an acceptable risk? Can we look at some other comparable behaviors to see where that's situated, right? And so we'll return to that. Now, the intention of the act, this underneath it, what are you doing, or why are you doing it? For example, if you are skydiving because you're in the military, or if you're skydiving because you're in training to be like a rescue diver, that's different. That's gonna be different than doing it for recreational purposes. Even doing it as a profession is gonna be different from doing it if you're in Hawaii and it's part of your trip, is you're just gonna go skydiving, right? And so kind of what we're gonna hone in here is we're gonna look at skydiving for recreational purposes, primarily for the experience or for fun. And so again, the object of the act that we're gonna be talking about is a tandem jump. So it's a skydiving for recreational purposes. So some of the circumstances are gonna be just the organization you're working with. How well do you know them? How certified are they? Things like that. Your own health risks, that's just the thing. Is there something about this which might put you more at danger than other people? Do you have dependents? Is there something going on with your state in life that needs to get factored in? Or the type of jump. There's just different levels of jump, or the weather, things like that, right? All of these are circumstances which are gonna play into the person making the decision, but also some of the circumstances of how safe the jump is. All right, so now we're gonna kind of go back to judge a little bit more of the object of the act, if it's good sort of in itself. And again, as I've kind of proposed, and I hope that we've agreed on, skydiving is an activity which has an inherent risk to it, even a life-threatening risk. But again, we're talking about 1 in about 500,000 times where it's going to end in fatality if you're doing this tandem jump. And so this is the principle that we hopefully we can agree on, is that there has to be a good reason for you to risk your life. So there has to be we're stewards of our lives. Our lives are not our own. And out of a pro-life approach and just a good reverence for what God has given us, we're supposed to try and stay alive, right? So if we're going to do something that has some risk factor, we have to have a good reason. So this is going to include things like having cosmetic surgery, where you're going to be going under anesthesia, or maybe some other extreme sports. If you're going to be doing something that has a part of this activity that's life-threatening, you have to have a reason for it. So now here's the thing: is it's okay, is this really life-threatening, or is this really a greater risk than we're going to be having with other activities? For example, the immediate counter-proposal are going to be probably one of two: driving or sort of other sports, right? So the immediate thing that people are going to throw out is that, the most dangerous thing you did in your day of going skydiving is drive to the plane or drive to the place. Well, I'm going to sort of say that there's two ways to look at that, okay? Primarily for me, certainly driving does have a level of risk involved. And there's ways in which you can do it, which is sinful, where it's like, it's objectively more dangerous. And so there's going to risk to it, but it's just part of kind of being of society, which I say is different. It's going to be a different type of act than skydiving, right? Because I just don't think that it's necessary. Skydiving is not necessary in the same way that driving will be, just to be a part of society. Okay, we're kind of all okay with driving. Everyone's driving. Like, is that really more dangerous than skydiving? My numbers, if I have them right, like there's about 40,000 deaths in the U.S. From driving, and again, a lot of different factors going into that. And so that each day we'll say that averages to about 110. So there's about 110 deaths a day through traffic accidents. There's also about 1.1 billion trips made. So there's about 1.1 billion trips made a day. So when you do the math, like that's one fatality for every about, I think is 110 million trips. But even more so, I do think that they're just different. They're different activities, because I think driving is something that you more like, again, it's part of society, whereas the skydiving thing isn't necessary in the same way. Okay, well, about other sports? Great. You know what? That's something real to look at. A lot of them have dangers to them, and they have fatalities, and they have other injuries, and that's all true. We can't really do a deep dive on it, but I would say one of the things that supports some of these physical sports is going to be some of these other lessons that we're learning. Like, certainly there's a part of playing football or soccer that's recreational. There's a part of it which has a danger involved, but there's also a lot we can learn about discipline, teamwork, sacrifice, etc. So there's what you're doing is playing the sport, but you're also in this school potentially a virtue. And so this would be something where, like, these intangibles of skydiving, you know, certainly these could be part, like you're doing this as a part of a communal experience, and you're forming memories, and maybe there are lessons that you're learning. They're not super evident to me. And so this could be something, this is what I would admit to be a bit of like a blind spot. Like, it seems to be something that we're doing for fun. It doesn't seem to have it doesn't seem to be like a huge school of virtue, especially if you're doing it just like on a tandem thing, on a one-off thing. So this is where it'd be different than some of these other kind of like sports that have a risk to them. But just kind of in conclusion is this: there is a risk involved with skydiving, and that's sort of just the numbers are there. I would propose it's an activity that's replaceable. So for some of these intangibles of having an experience, a communal experience, a fun experience, I do think you can find these in other ways. But we don't have guidelines of like how dangerous is too dangerous, or like what risk level, like numerically, does it become a risk. So my judgment looking at this is it doesn't seem super clear to me that skydiving is immoral or gravely immoral. It just doesn't seem like that. At the same time, there are the experience. It's not happening regularly, but maybe it's once a year, maybe it's once every couple of years, of somebody going on a trip and going skydiving for fun and never returning home. So the death thing really, really happens. That really happens. I can't like aggressively discourage like recreational skydiving, but at the same time, I would never encourage it. And I could never choose it like for myself. I just feel like with the mission that God's given me and the role God's given me, like it's not something I'd want to risk. A lot of reasonable people and like who I talk to kind of have a similar approach. It's like, it just doesn't seem like it's worth the risk, right? If you're going to risk your life, you have to have a good reason for it and do a little bit of research. And here's a little bit of the research on it. But one of the things about Catholic moral theology is things sometimes can be messy because we're making prudential judgments. And so we're looking at these facts and we're trying to make, a good judgment on them. And I think different moral theologians, different priests are going to have different judgments on it. That's Catholic moral theology applied to skydiving. Hopefully you don't hate me. Hopefully that was helpful and just a good sort of insight into how we look at and judge these things. All right. Thanks for watching. Remember, we are pilgrims on this earth. Somos peregrinos, poco a poco, little by little. Vamos a llegar. We're going to make it. Bye.